Just before we get into this video, guys, if you want to follow me on social media, on Twitter and Instagram, the links are here. And if you also want to support me on Patreon as well and help out my channel, that would be absolutely awesome as well. But let's get on with the video. Alright, it's fucking hot in the UK at the minute, so this video is going to be a nightmare because I've got lights in front of me and everything, and I can't have a fan on because otherwise there'll be noise disturbance in the background. So yeah, this is going to be fun. So if I pass out halfway through this video, you know why. Anyway, hello, welcome back to another Doctor Who video on my channel. Now, a lot of people always tell me you should do a ranking video or a list video about the Doctors and their eras. Now, today I'm going to be doing just that. I'm going to be talking about some of what I think are the best stories from the 6th Doctor era. Now, the thing is, some people might be like, well, why aren't you starting with the 1st Doctor? And that's purely because I just felt like talking about the 6th Doctor, and I thought it'd be interesting to switch this series up and not do it in order. Wibbly wobbly, timey wimey and all that, eh? Plus, I've been watching a couple of Colin stories recently, and I just thought, you know what, fuck it, let's just talk about him because he doesn't get enough love. A lot of people seem to put him rather low down on lists and whatnot, and I don't feel like he deserves that. Now, I am strictly going to be talking about the TV show here as well, so there's going to be no Big Finish stories. I know the 6th Doctor has a hell of a lot of really great stories on Big Finish, but I've not heard them all, and I don't feel like it would be right to talk about them considering my lack of knowledge. So yeah, purely looking at his TV era, and that is it. So as the title suggests, this is going to be a top 3. So I'm only going to be talking about my 3 favourite Colin Baker stories. Now, I'm going to be doing this for every single one of the Doctors. Sometimes it's going to be a lot easier, other times it's going to be a lot harder. With Colin, it was fairly easy because his era is quite short. However, the order in which I want to talk about them is something that I'm a bit kind of like, I really don't know. However, I'm going to start off then in number 3 with Revelation of the Daleks. Now, I've said this in many a video, but I personally think that the 80s had the best run of Dalek stories. I don't think that there's a bad one. I think Resurrection, Remembrance, and this one are all brilliant Dalek stories. But the reason why this is on the top 3 best for the 6th Doctor is because it is easily one of the best stories, not only of Colin's era, but of the 1980s. One of the major complaints that Colin Baker's era gets is the fact that it is too dark and it is too grim. Personally, for me, I love that. I love the fact that in this era of the show, particularly season 22, it really teeters over the line of what is too much for Doctor Who. At the end of the day, Doctor Who needs to have consequences. The nature of a show like this, you need to see that not everything is just going to be alright, not everything is going to be as happy as Larry, everything isn't just going to be the Doctor just washes his hands of it and then everything is fine. You need to see that people suffer and people die and planets and worlds are in genuine danger, and I think Revelation of the Daleks is a perfect example of that. Its world building is phenomenal. The idea of Davros converting humans into Daleks and also feeding said humans the remains of dead people is such a fucking horrible idea, but one that totally works. Everything about this story is grim. Its tone, its atmosphere, the characters, and in a story like this, I love it. Now, in terms of it being a Dalek story, I wouldn't necessarily say it's the best pure Dalek story. They do have some great moments, don't get me wrong. The Glass Dalek being a highlight for me. But overall, the Daleks don't really feel like they're the centerpiece of this story. It is more so Davros, which is kind of a common theme for a lot of Dalek stories post-Genesis, including Genesis as well. And if I had one gripe, it's the fact that part 1 of this story feels like part 1 of a 4-part story, which is quite bad considering that this is a 2-part story, albeit 45 minutes. Apart from that, this is just a bloody good story that is proper grim, and thank fuck that the DJ dies because he's a fucking prick. I hate him. Next up then, we're going to be talking about Attack of the Cybermen. Now, some people might be thinking, whoa, what the fuck, why have you put this here? Why have you put it ahead of Revelation? But yes, I know, you guys know why it's here. I love the Cybermen, particularly these Cybermen, so it's going to be high. Not only that, I literally just watched it again today, and it is just fucking good. It's even better than I remembered it. Again, like with a lot of season 22, it is grim. And it's also quite brutal as well, in a lot of ways that we don't really see the Cybermen as well throughout Classic Who or even the modern show. This is arguably the most brutal that the Cybermen have ever been. Obviously, there's the infamous moment where Lytton gets his hands crushed, but the way that they pick people off in this story, or the way that they threaten people, is just horrible. Like, there's a scene with one of the Cryons where, if you don't know, the Cryons have to live below freezing. And there's one scene where they're trying to get information out of this Cryon. They don't get the information that they want, so they're like, right, okay. They put her out into the corridor and she boils alive. Moments like that I just think are fantastic. And also, yes, you could argue that this story is too convoluted. Doesn't really need to bring Lytton back, however, it adds backstory to a character that wasn't overly interesting before, but makes him interesting. There's a lot of references to previous Cyberman stories, such as The Invasion, The 10th Planet, Tomb of the Cybermen. Like, there's so many different references here. Now, if you were unfamiliar with all the Cyberman lore, it can get a bit much, and I fully understand that. However, for me, as somebody who loves the Cybermen as much as I do, I know all these references, so for me, it all makes sense and it ties in really well. I think Eric Saywood wrote a brilliant script here. It's not as good as Earthshock, however, it's not far off. And after the twin dilemma, Colin really feels like he's properly settled into the role of the Doctor. He is definitely a lot more toned down in this story. He still has a couple of moments here and there, but overall, this is the Doctor as we know him. And kind of like I was saying before about there needs to be consequences in Doctor Who, basically in this story, apart from the Doctor and Perry and a few Cryons, everybody fucking dies. I love stories like that. I love where there isn't really a happy ending. And like I say, because the Doctor has recently gone through this regeneration trauma, he is going to be questioning himself. And at the very end of this story, he does it again for a very, very genuine reason. A severe lapse in judgment cost somebody their life, and the Doctor has to deal with it. I love moments like that. It's great character building. So honestly, if you are a bit skeptical of Attack of the Cybermen, seriously go and check it out again. It is that fucking good, but I am biased, so. And then of course at number 1 it's got to be Vengeance on Varos. Now this is just easily the most grim and brutal out of all of Doctor Who, more than likely. It's a very cool story in the sense that it takes the idea of reality television and sort of politicians and them being corrupt, and it turns it into a real dystopian future mixed in with the Doctor. You have hangings in this, you have acid baths, you have torture, you have this weird slug guy who is probably actually one of the better villains in the 80s. I don't know what it is. Syl doesn't quite do it for me. He lacks something, but as an idea and as a concept, I think he is pretty cool. He is just this slimy little greaseball, and you just hate him and his little fucking laugh. It's not quite that, but it's somewhat like that. This is the one Colin Baker story that I would say, okay, if you want one story, go and check that one out. One thing that I find really good about the Colin Baker era, in particular season 22, is the fact that the world building is really good. And I think this is probably the best example of this. You see this politician and how people vote and some of the horrible things that is in this world. What I love about a story like this is the fact that it shows you how gullible people can be, and it shows you how governments are essentially a popularity contest, and it also shows you how governments can easily be bribed and tricked. And it's things like that that make it really interesting. I know people bang on about politics and things now, but when it's done well, like it is in a story like this, it is so effective. Like, there's power corruption, there's cheating, there's all sorts of stuff in this. And you can tell it's bad because as soon as the Doctor starts sniffing around and he starts trying to investigate what's going on, he gets sucked into it himself. I don't know, I can't really explain it. You just have to see it to understand it and to fully get the full picture that they're trying to do here. I mean, there's a bit where Perry does turn into a bird woman, and we're gonna forget that because it is a bit crap. But like I say, this is a genuinely great Doctor Who story, and if I had to pick one, this is the best Colin story, easily. I don't want to really talk about it too much because if you haven't seen it, I want you guys to go and check it out. Now, I will say a couple of honourable mentions. The two Doctors for me, I really wanted to put on this. However, I don't think it's better than the other 3 stories that I've just spoken about, and it is also a bit long as well. However, seeing Colin and Patrick Troughton together and the Sontarans back, and just this really great story, especially with beautiful filming locations in Seville, really worth the watch as well. And also, I'm going to say something from Trial of a Time Lord as well, probably Terror of the Vervoids, because that is my personal favourite segment. However, overall, I think Trial of a Time Lord is a bit of a letdown and a bit boring. For me, that is the strongest segment. I know people say Mind Warp, but I would go with Vervoids. But anyway guys, in the comments below, let me know what you think. Do you agree with the choices that I made? If not, what would you have put in your top 3 Colin Baker stories? This will be a series, so I am going to be talking about all of the Doctors. Which Doctor's next? I don't know. we'll have to wait and see. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you leave a like on it, subscribe for more, because like I mentioned, I am going to be doing more of these. Social media and Patreon links are in the description below as usual, so if you would follow me on any of those things, I would absolutely love you forever. But until next time guys, you take care of yourselves. Goodbye. Right, I'm putting this fucking fan on because it is just too fucking hot and I can't cope and this is ridiculous. I'm ginger. I'm not built for heat.